Okay, welcome everyone to, I forget what episode this is now, but I think it's episode 3 of 2025 with um, my colleague and um, friend, Heidi Brown, Professor Heidi Brown, although she's not big on titles. We attempted to do this last year, but of course I had a bad connection and it was just, I was so nervous and was like, can we please redo this? And of course, Heidi with her extremely busy schedule was gracious enough to put me in. So we're here now. And of course, this is my new rebranded podcast. So previously was called Lawyers with Stories. It's now called Lawyers Uncharted. And hopefully the name says it that when we start out in this big daunting field called law, we go in most of the time very naively thinking it's going to be a straight path, but as you will hear from Heidi's story and you would have heard from our previous guests, they took all kinds of dips and turns, coincidences, serendipitous moments that led them into what they're doing now, which is the thing that they really enjoy. So this podcast is mainly aimed towards law students, law graduates who are looking for direction. Maybe you are also away into the field and you're not feeling it. You want to get out, you want to figure out how do I find my place. I'm big on people finding their place in the profession as opposed to fitting in with everything else and just now dealing with the crowd. So I'm sure you'll pick out some gems and of course give us your feedback and any suggestions for the guests, right? So without further ado, I'm gonna let Heidi take it away. She's gonna give you her story and of course how she ended up teaching at a very prestigious New York Law School without a master's degree. And how she made that happen, right? So Heidi, where is yours?
Great. Well, I feel like this time we're geographically closer because I'm actually on my spring break from teaching in Sardinia. So we're only 1 hour
One
time
hour.
zone as opposed to last time. Thank you for having me. I love that the title is Uncharted because that has been my life. I started out with a very charted life. I went to law school. I grew up in Virginia near Washington, D.C. in the United States, and I went to law school right out of college. So I was 21 years old when I went to law school and really just thought I was supposed to do that and then work at a law firm and get on the partnership track and work hard forever and make partner. Well, 6 years into I did that at first. I got good grades in college. I got into law school. And as I shared with you last time, and as I write about a lot, I struggled a lot with the performance aspects of law school. I did well in the research and writing aspects, but I'm an introvert and I also grapple with extreme public speaking anxiety, although I've worked really hard now to be able to perform on the international stage. But law school was not really an easy road for me, but I ended up getting a great job. I ended up working in a law firm. It just happened to do construction litigation, which I didn't really know what those two words meant put together, but we represented builders of sports stadiums and power plant projects and bridges and tunnels, et cetera. I loved the job, but I was also married in my 20s. I got married very young. I met him when I was 18. We got married when I was 24. And we were just so young. We were together 12 years and then the relationship sort of fell apart. I was working all the time, et cetera. So I went through this sort of quarter life crisis at the age of 30 and moved to New York and had to start completely over. Plus, I was going through really trauma related to the end of the relationship, but I reinvented myself. I mean, talk about uncharted. I applied for a new job. I got a new job. This is the year 2000, so I can veer into the 9/11 story if you want me to, but I ended up working in a law firm in the World Trade Center. And that was, kind of intense. I wasn't doing very well mentally at the time because I was going through this really traumatic divorce. And so I took a leave of absence from the firm 3 months before 9/11 happened. And then I was on a plane that day instead of in the building.
Mm,
Thank God. I asked for time to take care of myself, which took me outside that building that day. And I ended up being on a plane that got diverted to Newfoundland, Canada for 5 days. So 9/11 really, again, was like an uncharted territory for me because it drove me into, first of all, to heal from
Mm.
my divorce because, my whole country and really the world was kind of grieving collectively. So I felt like it was time for me to kind of move beyond my personal grief and think about something bigger than myself. So anyway, we can talk about that more if you want. But I charted a new path again. I got another job at a small firm. So at that point, I had had experience in a medium-sized boutique litigation firm, the big law firm in the Trade Center in New York, and then I became a brief writer for a very small firm.
Mm.
And then I'll just get to the professor part, and then I'll stop talking. I was working on a power plant litigation, and my whole firm, this was still on the East Coast of the United States, a bunch of us moved out to the West Coast because the case was in California. And while I was working on the case, I got invited to submit my resume to teach legal writing. And so I never knew anything about legal academia at the time. I didn't like my experience with legal academia as a student. So I just like, oh, but I liked teaching. I liked explaining the law to people. And so I applied for the job, but I didn't get it. I came in second. And so I was like, okay, it's not meant to be. 3 months later, the Friday before the law school new academic year was starting, the dean called me up and he said, "Are you still interested? Because we admitted too many students. We need an extra professor. Can you start on Monday?" I said yes. I had no syllabus. I had no textbook. I had never taught in a classroom before, but I said yes. And that was 16 years ago. And so the first few years of my teaching, I was still practicing law at the same time. So I just never slept. But then I moved back to the East Coast, moved back to New York, and then got a job at New York Law School. Left that job after 4 years to go be the director of a legal writing program at Brooklyn Law School. And then last year returned to New York Law School, where I'm very, very, very happy and I get to be very creative and do all the things that I love. So that's sort of my weird serpentine, three law firms, three law schools. And oh, and now I write. I'm a writer. And in fact, you mentioned titles. I never like writing. When I fill out forms, I don't put my fancy titles of
Yeah.
lawyer or professor. I did go back and get that master's degree, by the way. But I don't put any of that. I write writer because I really identify in
Yeah.
my soul as a person who writes as the most important thing that I do. And then the writing has led to this amazing life doing public speaking all over the world, which is really fun. So that's me. Long story.
No, I think in this context, we appreciate serpentine career path. Because I mean, that's what makes it so colorful. We can do ourselves such a disservice when we expect it to be the same as everyone. And the question, or I get this existential question, often it's that, oh, Lisa, my friends have applied for internships and, here we call it practical vocational training. You say everyone's applying for PVT. My friends have all gotten in places at law firms. I didn't get it. Is something wrong with me? Then
Mm.
I'm like, well, like now we have a bigger problem, right? Because up until this point, we expected everyone, all of you guys to be on the same path. And that's just not the way it plays out. Because after graduation, I mean, you're thrown out there and anything can happen. So I think that's the one misconception. I don't know if it's a global thing amongst law students, but I just think it's this one track, one path, that a law degree means law firm, means, like you said, partner, means working yourself to death, putting your name on that board. And, it's just, and you can do that for a while, and then realize it's not for you. But I think what's I would like this generation to do is not even have to go down that route. To just know, like, that's not for me. And I'm glad you brought up the introvert part because that's something I've come to appreciate in the field, at least in terms of your personality type and your career choice. And law is not something that an introvert would necessarily go for. So maybe you can just talk about how you made that work, especially doing the opposite of what an introvert likes to do, and that is standing on the stage and running around the world and speaking. So, like, how have you made that, even from the time you were in the farm to now you are in the public speaking arena? Like, how have you made that introvert thing work?
It's been hard but really fun. And
Uh-huh.
so how it happened when I was practicing law, so for the first 14 years of my adult, professional life,
Mhm.
I was forced to do, but because of my job, I was a litigator, I had to go negotiate, I had to go take depositions, I had to go to
Yeah.
court, but I felt like I was being taught or trained to mirror the personalities of these strong,
Yeah.
male personalities that were always across the table from me, which was totally not me.
Yeah.
But through all those years, I mean, honestly, I'm not exaggerating. It was 14 years of well-meaning mentors giving me kind of bad advice because
Yeah.
they would say, fake it till you make it, or, just do it, just prepare and you'll be fine. But none of those mantras worked for me.
Yeah.
And what did work finally was when I started teaching that first year, when I walked into that classroom as a professor, scared still that I was going to look like a fraud, I realized that my smartest or my best legal writing students, I would see their writing. My students that would get the top grades on my legal writing assignments were the quietest students in my class. And it
Mhm.
it really and they were the ones who would come to my office and confide in me, hey, I love research and writing, but I'm scared to be called on in class. In the US, it's taught by the Socratic method. You don't know when you're going to get called on. And for quieter students, I also have shyness and social anxiety too, on top of the introversion, which is totally different from introversion. And I have a really robust blushing response. I turn red. I mean, I look red right now, but that's from the Italian sunshine. Um, so teaching and seeing my students going through some of the same stuff I went through is kind of like your whole mission. I want to help these students
Mhm.
avoid the 14 years of anxiety that I
Yeah.
did when everyone was telling me to be something else. Fake it till you make it, just be more confident. Even my mom would be like, just be more extroverted. Well, that's like telling a dog to be a cat or a cat to be a dog. So I started writing about it,
Yeah.
but I didn't know really where my writing was going, but I knew I wanted to research introversion and extroversion and figure out how to convince myself, but also my students and the profession that introverts bring tremendous gifts
Yeah.
to first of all, every personal relationship, but also every task, every project. I mean, I could go on and on about the gifts of introverts, but we think really methodically and deeply before speaking out loud.
Mhm.
So we're constantly vetting and testing ideas and words and opinions and solutions to problems. Not that extroverts don't do that, but they do it aloud, and introverts do it internally to
Yeah.
try to get it as perfect as possible before sharing it.
Yeah.
So I realized I was always the quietest person in meetings, but at the end of the meeting, I had taken a ton of notes and I sort of had synthesized a possible answer to a problem, whereas everybody else was still sort of debating.
Mhm.
And so it led me to write my book called The Introverted Lawyer. And in that book, I talk about the gifts that introverts bring to the legal profession, but then also figured out a process for what I call amplifying our voices authentically. I
Mhm.
completely stopped trying to pretend
Mhm.
I was an extrovert because I'm totally not.
Yeah.
And I really understood how I do my best work. Like I do my best work, frankly, at home because I can control the environment. I don't like noise. I don't
Mhm.
like bright lights. I like things to be temperature wise pretty cold. I don't want to be hot. So working in the office is difficult for me when I have to write something really important. Obviously, I go to the office because I teach in person and I do meetings and stuff in person, but that knowledge, figuring out how I, as an introvert, can tap into my most creative side, my most thoughtful problem solving side, my most productive research and writing side, it really opened up my eyes to the how introverts can really be powerful attorneys if we take more control over our working style. And then on the public speaking side, oh my gosh, when that book came out, suddenly these law firms and bar associations were calling me, hey, can you come do a like a well-being presentation or a book talk based on introversion? And I was like, oh no. Um, but I'm so glad I said yes. I said yes to everything. And that book led to me really understanding how I can prepare better. I started treating myself like an athlete. I put myself
Mm.
in boxing lessons to understand my breathing. I decided to just get over the blushing situation. I discovered a great book by this woman, Erica Hilliard, who wrote The Best Thing About Blushing I've Ever Heard. She said, a blush is life coursing through you. So now when
Mm.
I blush, I'm like, oh, I'm alive. Yay,
I'm
me.
like,
So things like that, and that book led to me writing a book about fear, and the fear book led me to writing a book about kind of again treating ourselves like athletes or performers and not just focusing on our intellect, instead focusing on multiple dimensions of our bodies, our emotions, our brains, so we can, as introverts and as even nervous public speakers, step into each performance arena and feel really strong and incredible. It doesn't always go perfectly, obviously, but we can be proud of the effort that we put in and realize, okay, we're building a track record of
mm,
successful performances. So next time we feel nervous, we can be like, oh wait, no, I did this before. It wasn't perfect, but it was good, and I'm
yeah,
going to do it again.
yeah. Wow. It seems like the book backfired. The book made you more public and made you more in
Yes.
demand, writing about introversion. That's quite interesting. Um, yeah, so for me, in my dealings with the student graduate demographic, I'm always telling them, when it comes to career planning, at least, you got to know yourself, because
Oh.
you got to line everything up, right? And I find again a lot of them, in addition to expecting that straight path, that linear, non-serpentine path, it's like you find that I find a lot of them just drag themselves through it. So whether it's a personality thing that they're fighting against, whether it's expectations, family expectations, cultural pressure to get through this law thing and start practicing. And what pains me is to see that misalignment.
Mhm.
And I feel like, again, like you said, you wrote the book to, people to avoid those 14 years where you had to just fake it till you made it. And what pains me is when I see that misalignment, and of course, what comes out of that is then you get tired. You don't have energy. You get sick. Your immunity drops, and you're wondering why. And so I'm always prompting this self-discovery. Like, guys, you're sitting at home, you graduated with a law degree, you're waiting for that internship opportunity. Discover yourself, okay? Discover who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, your personality type. Because of course that's gonna hugely factor into your experience, not just, I mean, as a professional, but I always say, you build your life around your career around your life. I think I did a post about that, but they're coming out tomorrow. Um, so a lot of the time they jump in. I don't know if it's the same thing. Maybe you can give some insights from the American perspective, where they just jump into this thing called law, or they start with the pre-law program. And it's like, I don't know myself. I need to get a degree, and my parents want me to do it. It's big with Indian people. Um, Lawyer, doctor, engineer, teacher, accountants, right? The big time. So you have to get in there. So like you get in and like, okay, I've got to do these things. And then maybe you enjoy the academic part. And then it's like, oh, is this required of me? Oh, is that required of me? And then of course you in it now, some cost fallacy, right? I can't pull out now. My parents have paid so much, so I've got to make it work. And of course, you still haven't figured out who you are. And I also went through that. Um, you just sort of going through the motions, like I've got to do this next, do this next, do this next. Internship, bar exam, this, work, some working. And then by the time you come out of that process, it's like 6 to 7 years later. And then you're wondering why you are, you know, have insomnia. And so it's like we kind of separate who we are. We kind of we decide to be untrue to ourselves by being true to I need to have a career. That desire to have a career is more important than figuring out who you are first. And as you demonstrated, you can still find a place with all of that. We're not saying if you discover certain things about yourself, you don't do more. That may be the case. But if you know yourself, then of course you can find some, you can find like you use the tools of boxing and whatever. You can do stuff to make it work rather than going through that whole college experience. And it's like, oh, I gotta drag myself. And because you probably even an introvert, you don't know it. And you're like forcing yourself or you just not cut out for academia, whatever it might be. So maybe you can just give some insight from the American I guess law school perspective. Like, is that the same thing there? Like, or are students are they more self-aware when they get into law?
I'm so glad you're asking this. So I kind of joke with first of all, the American students are the same. They come to law school because for whatever reason why they come to law school, but I think they get on this path and they don't give themselves permission to get to know themselves, especially if they're going straight through from university to law school, or maybe a year or two of work in between.
Yeah,
So I joke with my students that I was mad at Socrates for 20 years for inventing the Socratic method that I unfortunately let intimidate me in law school. But when I was writing my introversion book, I started studying Socrates and the original Socratic method to try to understand how to sort of deconstruct it and prepare my students better to be able to handle it, even if they're nervous.
yeah,
That led me to discover, so Socrates had this motto of know thyself. And
yeah,
it was
yeah,
actually inscribed across the Temple
yeah,
of Apollo in Delphi, Greece.
yeah,
And so he was all about, we don't have to pretend like we know everything. Let's get on this journey of self-discovery.
yeah,
And so that completely, first of all, changed my attitude about Socrates. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to test this out on myself. And then I'm going to teach my students what know thyself means.
mm,
And oh my goodness, it changed my life. So, figuring out what are our values. We
yeah,
talk about value, we throw that word around, but what does it really mean? What do values really mean? What's most important to us? And then you mentioned the word alignment or misalignment. Are our personal values aligned with the school we chose, or our personal values aligned
yeah,
with the internship we chose? So values are huge. And my friend Jordana Confino, I don't know if you know her on
mm,
LinkedIn, but she has this awesome values discovery guide.
yeah,
I can send it to you so you can link to it if you want. I did that myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that like independence and flexibility in my
uh-huh,
work life is of huge value of mine. And that was so misaligned with my first law firm, or my actually mostly my second and third law firms, where I had no control. I was
yeah,
told I have no control. And that gave me extreme anxiety because one of my values is being able to choose, whether I shut my door when I have to work on a piece of writing.
mhm,
So values are huge. Strengths. There's a strengths assessment that I'm obsessed with, and I have all my students do it. It's the values and action inventory on character strengths. And again, it gives us, you take the test, it's free and it's confidential, but you get a list of your strengths,
mm,
and they're ranked from 1 to 24. And just knowing my strengths, the top five signature strengths, the experts say they have the three E's. They energize, excite, and come easily for you. So when you compare
mhm,
your top strengths to your bottom strengths, I realized, oh my gosh, totally. Like my top strengths are perseverance, zest, which is all my like travel and fun stuff, and then curiosity, creativity, and love of learning, which so aligns with me as a teacher. My bottom two strengths are leadership and teamwork. And which is so true because I mean I can lead. I led, a writing program for 7 years, but it didn't energize, excite, and come
mm,
easily for me. I did it. I forced myself to do it, but it
yeah,
doesn't excite me like writing and creating and all the top strengths. So I would recommend values, figure out our values, figure out our strengths, And then those two huge pieces of information, in addition to our personalities types, our working styles, there's a great book about, it's called The Extended Mind. I'm totally blanking on the author now, but I can get it for you. In her book, she talks about environment and what type of environments we do our best work in. Like that's
Mm.
something no one talks about. In the law
Yeah.
firm, it's like, here's your office, here's your desk, here's your fluorescent light over your head. Like it or leave it, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, environment is so critically important to my creativity and how I feel
Mhm.
and in keeping my anxiety at bay. Also, I'll just throw out one more thing. The boxing has changed my life because it's taught me the concept of somatic intelligence. Like I carry so much anxiety, or my anxiety is very obvious when, I blush or like I'm sweating or I get a rapid, I mean, it's not so obvious to the outside that I have a rapid heartbeat when I'm nervous, but putting ourselves into movement or exercise, even if we don't like exercise, it's so important. It teaches us to get in touch with what our body is telling us about our environmental circumstances, our interpersonal relationships with bosses. Like I worked in three law firms. I had three male bosses who screamed all the live long day.
Mm.
I still have all that, flinching. Like anytime
Yeah.
I hear someone scream at someone, I flinch. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
because it's stuck in my body, right?
Yeah.
So learning the concept of somatic intelligence for junior attorneys would just be game changing, I think, because it's not that we're gonna shy away from tough environments or tough situations, but we're gonna be more prepared to understand how that affects us and determine how we can either realign those situations to fit our values and strengths,
Mhm.
or we walk away. And I mean, I am living proof that I've walked away from three law firms. I took a turn through, a couple law schools. I've said no to opportunities where I felt like I wasn't, being
Yeah.
paid enough or whatever. And so we might not feel as, especially when we're more junior attorneys, we might not feel that we have choice, but we do.
Mm.
So I think you're so right that if we get to know ourselves starting from day one and
Mm.
also creating a shared vocabulary, like that's why I like these assessments because they give us words we can use to share
Yeah.
with each other. Like, I'm so curious about what your top five strengths are, and then I can share mine and we can share those with our students. And then it just becomes more of a culture, a strengths-based culture, instead of
Mm.
us always worrying about what our best friend got on the test or, what job the guy next to me in class got for the summer. Like, who cares about any of that stuff? We can be proud of our unique recipe of our values and strengths and figure out like puzzle pieces where we fit most in the job market.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that semantic intelligence part from the first time we chatted, and I want to touch on that. But I think I also I often get questions about I gotta go for an interview. You know, do you know the kinds of questions they're gonna ask me? And that kind of thing. And I say, look, if I had the inside track with every law firm, the human resources departments, I'll give you the question, but I don't. I'm not psychic. You need to figure out yourself because up to that point, they just received your resume, your CV. So it's just a piece of paper, right? But they're not going to hire the piece of paper. This is your shot to present yourself to them. So I say things like, don't put on your interview face, like just be
Mhm.
yourself. And of course, I talk about the power imbalance. Okay, when
Mm.
it comes to these law school or even law firm interviews, as a graduate going in, that I go like, and I find that this practice where they just give it away. They just give away, even within once they've gotten the internship. It's like there's no autonomy. Okay, so they've given away besides, in the interview as well, we like you think it's a one-way street, but it's actually a two-way street. Um, Once they get in, it's like the power is gone. You've given away all of the power because that person is the senior person, I'm a nobody, I know nothing. And I'm like, why did you do that? Like, you need to retain autonomy. And if you do that self-discovery, you will understand that at the core of everything, you are an autonomous human being with a specific psychology. And when you're sitting in an interview, I say, and the hardest question, ironically, the hardest question that they cannot answer is tell me about yourself.
Mm.
And that should be the easiest one. That should be the one that you have your value statements, your value proposition. I say, why don't you can end off the interview, why don't you create a counter offer? So they've put out an advert, they're offering you this position. End of the interview by saying, this is what I can give to the firm. Now you can only do that if you know yourself, right? You say, these are my strengths, I have these talents, I can, teach other incoming interns, I can mentor them, I can show them the ropes without being paid extra. So you need to create a counter offer because you want to make that application so irresistible. But you can only do that if you know yourself, if you know what you're good at. Because those things will come naturally to you. Like you said, the stuff that energizes you, excites you,
Mhm.
right? That wakes you up, that you can do very easily without being paid most of the time, and it's like, oh, like all of this stuff is like revolutionary, but to me it isn't. I think it's because I've gone through that journey incidentally, not intentionally. None of what I've done achieved to date has been intentional, right? But I want the incoming group to do it intentionally. So it's like you go for the interview and it's like offer yourself. What are your non-negotiables? What is your personal value system? What is your this? What is your that? What is your place in the profession? How do you even see your weaknesses working for you? Like you do this really intense self-assessment. You come to terms, like, okay, some qualities I can't redeem, there are some that I can. And you just be really honest with in an interview situation or even in the employment situation. And I feel like that just anchors you to say, I'm I've arrived, or I'm here in the profession, whether people like it or not, whether or not they're difficult people around you. Um, so I think that's very important. And also that somatic intelligence, but I think what I can call what I just spoken about as self-awareness, now we're going to be aware of our body, and very often it's like I can see, and I've been through it, so I can see the student is burning out, or they're close to burnout, or they're already in therapy, but they got back to that situation, that toxic boss, um, principal, whatever. And it's like, you need to leave and be like, no, I can make it, I can make it, I can make it. And it's like, you can see the clip is coming up ahead and they're going to just undo all the recovery they might have been making in therapy. And it's like, that is so neglected. And I've been posting a little bit, sort of dabbling in that whole thing about what's my body telling me,
Right.
right? And of course, if you saw my updated LinkedIn banner, I realized everything that I do in the profession is to create safe spaces, whatever I'm doing. So I want the profession is not inherently safe. I think it's a global thing, right? Um, so it's like, oh, I need to know how my body is feeling. I need to pay attention. Because if I just push it down, push it down, push it down, week to week to week, like you said, 14 years or something, man, it's you're like a storehouse of
Mm.
negativity. But here you are, you're smiling, you're trying to do your thing, make a difference in the world, but you essentially lying to yourself, right? Um,
Right.
so maybe just go a little bit deeper on that somatic intelligence, because I think it's one of those professions where when we are in the heat of the battle, in a law firm, in a practice, we're like, oh, I'm young, I can go without sleep, or no, I'll just talk it out because I had a difficult childhood and that's what my parents told me. So, so My body feels that way. It'll get over it. It'll get over itself, And I'm always encouraging people to take that one day where you just, whether you journal, whether you, whatever, you just let it out. For you, it's boxing. For others, it might be journaling. For others, it might be gardening. I'll be like, you need to sort of take an inventory, take the stock. How's your body feeling at the end of the day? Even at the end of every day, you need to do a little ritual. But you can't, if you expect this body to serve you, and all, like I said, I've done a post where I'm talking about creating, sort of shaping your career around your life. So if you're ignoring what your body is going through, you're going to be absolutely useless to the people that really matter. The people that will be there when you don't have the job anymore, right? So just maybe take a little bit of a deep dive into this whole as aspiring lawyers or people already in the field. What does it mean to pay attention? And of course, what are the common signs of, the lights are flashing, the engine light is flashing or whatever,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. Well, first of all, there's an incredible book called by Bessel van der Kolk called The
Yeah.
Body Keeps the
Mm,
Score. And I mean, it's all there in that book that our body has retained every piece of trauma, however we individually and collectively define trauma, because there's little traumas and there's big major traumas, but they build up. And unless we do what you just said, by learn how to get it out of our system, it's all still in there.
yeah.
And so for me, I journal as well. So for me, I like what I recommend to students and to anybody listening to this is that you give yourself some time again to get to know yourself and pay attention to your body. And so I do that through journaling as well. So I have a whole routine that I start my day every morning. I just did it this morning with Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way, and she talks about morning pages. And you write 3 pages of handwritten journaling, not 2 pages, not 4 pages, exactly 3 pages. So if people get stressed about this, they can buy the tiniest journal because you got to do 3 pages. But to me, that's when I do a body inventory and I kind of pay attention from head to toe, what I'm feeling. And by doing that in a journal every day, it's taught me to do that again when I do feel that pang of that rapid heartbeat or my shoulder. I can tell that my fight, flight, or freeze response is to first freeze, and my body instinctively tries to get really small. So my shoulders cave in, I cross my arms, I cross my legs, but that's not conducive to me breathing well and me managing my always rapid heartbeat.
Mm,
So training ourselves to journal or just jot down your body inventory. What's happening? Where do you feel the anxiety first? For me, it's always the heart first. Then I feel my shoulders cave in. Then my face gets hot. Sometimes the face gets hot first, but paying attention to those different changes.
yeah.
And then what that trains us to do though is all that stuff is going to happen anyway. It's not like that's not going to happen. Like my
Mm,
face will always get red when I'm nervous or stressed. But when I am aware of it, I can recalibrate. And that's
yeah.
where the somatic intelligence is so huge. And, some people are never going to take boxing lessons, but you might take yoga lessons, or you might yoga classes, or you might just do stretching, or you might like to dance. And so all those things that we do to move our bodies, we understand like, oh, okay, if I put my shoulders back again and stand with 2 feet on the ground and open up my arms, um, that calms me a little bit. So why wouldn't I do that when I'm about to go negotiate for something?
Yeah.
And then there's that great TED talk by Professor Amy Cuddy, she talked about power poses, and
Mhm.
she did an experiment. She got criticized for this experiment because I think it wasn't replicable, but I watch that power pose all the time, or that TED talk all the time. I do the power pose. You either put your hands on your hips like a superhero or behind your head like a boardroom executive, or my favorite one is to stand like a starfish. Um, so whatever feels good for you or us individually, we're all going to be different. But
Yeah.
but to your point about journaling, and for me, the journaling, the boxing, the physical inventory, the standing like a starfish. I
Yeah.
layer on top of that two songs that I play before I go perform because that whole process layered on top of each other gets me totally ready physically, somatically, mentally, and emotionally. So then I know I've done everything possible. I mean, obviously, we do the substantive preparation too, but for me, that's way less important than the
Yeah.
physical and the
Yeah.
mental and the emotional.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I came upon in all my research is there was this Russian sports psychologist back in the 1960s and 1970s, and he studied athletes, and he determined that every athlete has a unique, in what he called an IZOF, IZOF, an individual zone of optimal functioning.
Mm.
Not a one size fits all zone like law school teaches, but an individual zone of optimal functioning where we all, if we're aware
Mm.
of how our physical bodies are feeling, what our emotions are doing, positive
Yeah.
and negative, that soundtrack, I have a very negative mental soundtrack and I have to press pause and delete and then play a new positive soundtrack. I've prepared for this. I've done the work. I know what I'm talking about. I care about this. Who cares if my face turns red?
Mm.
If I reach one person in this performance, I've done my job.
Yeah.
So just layering all those techniques on top of each other
Yeah.
and then doing the performance and then reflecting again through journaling or even just, sitting still afterwards and understanding, okay, what went well? What could I change for next time? And just constantly experimenting with knowing ourselves. Like I said earlier, we developed this track record of, oh my gosh, that was actually fun.
Mm.
Or that I didn't like how that happened because, everybody always wants to talk to me right before I'm about to go on stage. And I can't, like, if anyone is talking to me, I am a mess. So now I have to say, I just need 30 seconds to myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
until I paid attention to those little things that were messing me up, and then the things that set me right, in my zone, until I started paying attention to those things, I had no idea. I was just doing what everybody else did, which
Mm.
didn't work for me.
Mm.
So it's so fun when you treat yourself like an athlete or treat yourself like a performer, treat yourself like a public speaker with your own individual, like whoever your favorite celebrity is, like figure out what they do, right before, because they all have their rituals. And it's not a
Mm.
superstition thing. This is not a superstition thing. This is
Yeah.
a treating ourselves with regard, like a creative person, an artist, a writer, a performer, an athlete, a singer, a dancer, whatever analogy we like the most. If we give ourselves that regard, we stick to what works for us and we don't have to listen to what everybody else is doing.
Mm.
It works, I promise.
Yeah, it's actually a very nice place to land the plane.
Yay.
Yeah, I mean, if you take one thing from this discussion, it's do what works for you, and you can only find that zone if you know who you are. So um, if you're at home, if you're using, I always say use the time to find yourself because most of the time you're just rushing through a degree, you're rushing through further training, further bar examination, and there's no time to even stop and think and say, like you said, recalibrate. Okay, where's my body at? How do I feel about my achievements? And I actually get, encouragement. I saw a sort of recent post by someone that said, "Whoa, she's like applying for like like your first legal job now as an attorney. We call them attorneys here. Um, and but she's just taken time off because she understands that she had a whole degree she studied for, and she's tired, and she's just like, yes, yes, that's what you need to do instead of plunging ahead. Some people call it a gap year, call it what you want. But man, just allow your body to recover because you're getting into something now that is arguably not going to give you. You got to develop that recovery routine, I think, after every sort of major development in your life. Like, and law school, I mean, college, law school, and then getting instead, they do it in one fell swoop. They get their degree, they go to law school, they do their bar examinations, here we call it board examinations, and then they just get into the field. And I'm like, where's the time to rest? You have you given your body any regard because we're gonna be expecting it now to perform?
Right.
Have you how are you going to perform if you haven't taken the time to just stop, breathe, take stock? Because arguably, I mean, studying probably puts you into a fight or flight mode because you're always anxious about your results. And what did my parents say? And when can I cover up this module in another semester? And I need to finish in 4 years. So you're constantly on tenterhooks. So you need to recover from that. And if you have a whole lot of, I would say, like a traumatic backlog, even if you had a difficult childhood, I mean, everyone's carrying all of that straight into the field. And that's one of the cycles like I want to be part of breaking because you don't have to become another toxic addition to the profession. You just know yourself, you just stop, you just pay attention to your body. Pay attention to what makes me cranky. Like I know. And so I have to have, sweets in my bag, or I know after a certain time I'm gonna get hungry, or have a sweet drink or something. Otherwise I'll just get unnecessarily cranky. So I prepare for it. Or like I learned to control my emotions in that case because if it's not their fault, I am extra cranky. So it's things like that. It's very practical things. So um we can talk for hours, but you have a wonderful scenery to get back to. Not much compared to mine. I mean, a whole lot more compared to mine. But thank you for your time, Heidi. I know you are a gold mine of I think practical information. I think we're tired, or at least I'm tired of people lecturing us. We want to hear from people that have suffered and that are making it and that are most importantly a work in progress. And neither you nor myself, we've not arrived. So we also still figuring it out, and as we're learning, we are imparting to people. So I'm very appreciative of your, I guess, existence
Thank you.
and contribution. Because again, we've got to start somewhere, and I think you probably won't be the first person to write about lawyering and introversion, but somebody had to start it, right? And I think it just adds to, it just builds that body of knowledge that we can also normalize this whole thing about being a legal and being an introvert. It's possible. And it's possible to find your place, and it's possible. Lawyers are not loud. We can break all those stereotypes and all of those things. So I'm very grateful for what you contributed, and I think also looking forward to more
Thank you. Yes,
conversations.
I just realized that 2 weeks from today is my 55th birthday, and I am just getting started. So
Same, same. I turned 40 last year, and I'm just getting started.
amazing.
Yeah.
I
So
love age. Age is amazing. Powerful aging.
yeah, I think just to end it off here is that I think we place too much emphasis, or society conditions us to think, oh, by 20 you need to do this.
Hmm.
By 20 you need to do this. By 40 you need to be settled down, or you need to finish having your babies. But you could find love at 70. You could choose to go to law school at 60. I mean,
Yep.
where does society get off putting all these like age limits on things? We are dynamic, we are colorful. In fact, our experience is more colorful, I think, the more unorthodox it is. So um, I'm certainly not one to place limits on achievements and things that we can become. I'd rather you finish off life like your last 10 years are really good.
Hmm.
Even if
Totally.
you wasted 50 years and you die at 60, but those last 10 years are like you lived your life, you lived your purpose, you found yourself, you knew yourself, and you just died empty. You emptied yourself in those 10 years. That's for me is a life learner. So hopefully both of us get to that point.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me today. It was very fun. I look forward to continuing the conversation.